The rivalry between Westview High's Mark Miller and Eastside Academy's Kenji Oh wasn't just about the scoreboard. It was about the electricity that crackled whenever they shared the same hardwood floor. Mark was the quintessential American golden boy, 6'4" of lean muscle, blonde hair usually damp with sweat, and a cocky grin that infuriated every opponent he faced. Ken, on the other hand, was a lethal combination of precision and grace. His Korean-American heritage gave him sharp, striking features, and his physique was built for speed, every muscle defined like a sculpture under the East Side jersey. The state semifinals were grueling. With 3 seconds left on the clock, Mark drove to the hoop, his shoulder brushing hard against Ken's chest. The contact was electric, a jolt that went deeper than a foul. Mark drew the whistle, sinking the free throws to win the game, but he didn't celebrate immediately. He turned to find Ken staring at him, chest heaving, eyes burning with a mix of fury and something Mark couldn't quite name. "Lucky shot, Miller," Ken breathed. Stepping into Mark's personal space, they were so close their jerseys snagged on each other. The scent of salt and adrenaline was heavy between them. Mark leaned in, his voice a low vibration. "It wasn't luck, Ken. I just wanted it more than you." "We'll see about that at the postseason camp," Ken countered, his gaze dropping briefly to Mark's mouth before snapping back up. He didn't pull away. He lingered just a second too long, letting the heat of their bodies simmer in the middle of the roaring gym. 2 weeks later, the elite Invitational camp started. Because of a clerical error by the coaches, or perhaps a cruel joke by the universe, the 2 biggest rivals in the state were assigned to the same dorm room. When Mark walked in, he found Ken already there, shirtless, unpacking a duffel bag. The sight stopped Mark in his tracks. Ken's back was a map of hard-earned muscle, the light from the window catching the sweat on his skin. Ken turned around, unbothered, his dark eyes tracing Mark's frame, with a slow, deliberate intensity that made the air in the small room feel thin. "Don't get too comfortable," Ken said, his voice smooth. "I'm not here to make friends." Mark dropped his bag, a slow smirk spreading across his face as he stepped closer, closing the distance until they were mere inches apart. "Good, because friends is the last thing on my mind when I look at you." The tension was a physical weight, thick and suffocating. Mark reached out, his fingers grazing the waistband of Ken's shorts as he moved to grab his own locker key. A move that was unnecessarily close. Ken didn't flinch. Instead, he grabbed Mark's wrist, his grip firm and hot. They stood there, locked in a silent challenge, the space between them vibrating with a hunger that had nothing to do with basketball. The first night at the Elite Invitational felt like a pressure cooker. The small dorm room was thick with the scent of expensive athletic rub and the unspoken words hanging between them. Mark lay on his bunk, arms folded behind his head, watching the shadow of Ken moving across the room. Every time Ken shifted in his sleep, the rustle of the sheets sounded like a roar in the silence. The next morning on the court, the coaches paired them for one-on-one drills. It was supposed to be a demonstration of elite defense, but it turned into something much more visceral. Mark guarded Ken with a physical intensity that bordered on a shove, his chest pressing into Ken's back as Ken tried to post him up. "You're playing dirty, Miller!" Ken gritted out, his breath hitching as Mark's hand lingered a second too long on his hip to steady himself. "I'm playing to win, Ken. You know how I am," Mark whispered into Ken's ear, his lips brushing the shell of it. Ken spun around, the ball forgotten as it bounced away. He shoved Mark back against the padded wall of the gym, his hands gripping Mark's jersey. The gym was loud with the sounds of other players, but for them, the world had shrunk to the few inches between their faces. Ken's heritage gave him that striking, lethal gaze, sharp eyes that were now locked onto Mark's, with a hunger that wasn't about a trophy. "Stop playing games," Ken hissed, his knuckles white against Mark's chest. "You've been hovering around me since the season ended. What do you actually want?" Mark didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into the contact, his heart hammering against Ken's palms. I want to see if you're as tough off the court as you are on it." That evening, after the mandatory lights out, the silence in the room was broken by the sound of Ken getting up. He walked over to Mark's bed, standing over him in the dark. The moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across his toned, half-Korean features. "I can't sleep," Ken said, his voice a low, rough velvet. Mark sat up, his own shirt discarded in the heat of the night. Their skin practically glowed in the dim light. "Me neither." Ken reached out, his fingers trembling slightly as they traced the line of Mark's jaw. The touch was a stark contrast to the violence of the court. It was hesitant, almost worshipful. Mark caught Ken's hand, pulling him down onto the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under their combined weight. "We're supposed to be rivals," Mark murmured, though his thumb was already stroking the back of Ken's hand. "Maybe that's why this feels so inevitable," Ken replied. He leaned in, the scent of his skin, clean, warm, and distinctly masculine, overwhelming Mark's senses. The first kiss wasn't soft, it was a collision, a release of months of built-up frustration and hidden glances. It tasted like desperation and adrenaline. Mark's hands found the back of Ken's neck, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them, their athletic frames tangling together in the narrow bunk. Ken let out a low, shaky breath against Mark's lips, his fingers digging into Mark's shoulders as the tension finally snapped. The small dorm bed felt like an island in the dark, the only sound the synchronized, heavy breathing of two athletes who had spent years trying to outrun one another, only to end up exactly here. Mark's hands, usually focused on the grip of a ball, were now focused on the curve of Ken's waist, pulling him flush against his chest. The friction of their skin was a different kind of heat than the midday sun on the blacktop. This was internal, a slow burn that threatened to consume them both. Ken broke the kiss just an inch, his forehead resting against Mark's. His dark hair was mussed, falling over his eyes in a way that made him look vulnerable for the first time. "If the scouts saw us like this," Ken whispered, his voice vibrating against Mark's lips, "the rivalry would be dead by morning." "Let it die," Mark murmured. He trailed his lips down Ken's jawline into the sensitive skin of his neck. He felt Ken shiver, a full-body tremor that stoked the fire in Mark's gut. "I'm tired of hating you, Ken. It takes too much energy away from this." Ken's response was to catch Mark's chin and pull him back into a deep, bruising kiss. It was possessive and hungry. Ken's hands wandered over Mark's broad shoulders, mapping the muscles he had watched from across the court for 3 seasons. He admired the strength there, but he loved the way Mark groaned when Ken's fingers found the small of his back. They shifted, the narrow bed creaking under their weight. Mark rolled them over until he was hovering over Ken, his arms braced on either side of Ken's head. In the moonlight, Ken looked like a masterpiece, the sharp, handsome angles of his face softened by a haze of desire. "You're always so composed," Mark teased, his voice dropping to a gravelly low. "I want to see you lose your cool just once." Ken reached up, his fingers tangling in Mark's blonde hair, tugging just enough to make Mark's breath hitch. "Then stop talking, Miller, and do something about it." Mark didn't need to be told twice. He leaned down, his chest pressing into Ken's, the contact electric. He began a slow, deliberate trail of kisses down Ken's sternum, tasting the salt on his skin, feeling the frantic rhythm of Ken's heart against his own. Every time Ken's breath hitched or his back arched off the mattress, Mark felt a surge of triumph that no buzzer beater could ever match. They stayed like that for hours, tangled in the sheets and each other, exploring the territory they had both been too proud to claim until now. The rivalry hadn't vanished. It had just transformed into a different kind of competition, one where the goal wasn't to win, but to see who could make the other surrender first. As the first hint of gray light began to touch the window, Ken finally pulled Mark's head down to his chest, holding him there. "Tomorrow's the final scrimmage," Ken said softly, his fingers tracing patterns on Mark's arm. Mark looked up, a lazy, satisfied grin on his face. "I know, and I'm still gonna dunk on you." Ken laughed, a genuine rich sound that filled the room. Try it, but don't be surprised if I catch you. The morning sun hit the gym floor in sharp, blinding squares as the final scrimmage of the camp began. The atmosphere was thick with scouts from top-tier universities, their clipboards ready, but for Mark and Ken, the only audience that mattered was each other. They lined up at center court for the tip-off. Ken's expression was back to its usual stone-cold focus, his half-Korean features sharp and unreadable. But as Mark stepped up opposite him, he caught the briefest flicker in Ken's eyes, a lingering heat that recalled the friction of the sheets and the weight of Mark's body against his just hours before. "Don't trip over your own feet, Miller," Ken murmured, his voice low enough only for Mark to hear. "I'd hate for you to have an excuse when I lock you down." Mark flashed that signature cocky American grin, his blonde hair pushed back by a sweatband. "Focus on the ball, Ken. Your head seems a little distracted today." The whistle blew and the game exploded into a blur of motion. It was the most physical matchup of the summer. Every time they collided in the paint, it felt like a silent conversation. Mark's chest hit Ken's shoulder during a screen, and for a split second, they both hesitated, the memory of that skin-to-skin contact sending a jolt through their systems. In the fourth quarter, with the score tied, Ken drove to the basket with a lightning-fast crossover. Mark stayed on him, his long arms draped over Ken, shadowing his every move. As Ken rose for the layup, Mark jumped with him, their bodies tangling in midair. It was a clean block, but the momentum sent them both crashing into the padded stanchion behind the hoop. They landed in a heap, limbs entwined. In the chaos of the whistle and the crowd's roar, Mark's hand found the back of Ken's neck, squeezing firmly for just a second. Ken's eyes snapped to his, blown wide, his chest heaving against Mark's. "You okay?" Mark breathed, his face inches from Ken's. Ken didn't answer with words. He grabbed the front of Mark's jersey, pulling him slightly closer, his thumb grazing the damp skin of Mark's collarbone. "I'm fine," Ken rasped, his voice thick with a tension that had nothing to do with the fall. "Just finish the game." The final buzzer sounded with Mark's team up by 2, but as the players shook hands, the victory felt secondary. When Ken reached Mark in the line, he didn't just give a quick pat. He held Mark's hand a beat too long, his fingers sliding against Mark's palm in a secret burning promise. "Meet me in the equipment room in 10 minutes, Ken whispered, his gaze intense enough to melt the ice in the water coolers. "We need to settle the score." Mark watched him walk away, the lean muscle of Ken's back rippling under the jersey, and felt a hunger that no championship trophy could ever satisfy. He didn't wait 10 minutes. He waited 5. The equipment room was dim, lit only by the sliver of light from the hallway and the hum of the industrial fans. It smelled of leather, floor wax, and the heavy, intoxicating scent of 2 elite athletes who had pushed themselves to the limit. When Mark slipped inside, he barely had time to close the door before Ken was there, pinning him against a stack of gym mats. Ken's fingers dug into the mesh of Mark's jersey, his breathing still ragged from the game. The sharp, handsome lines of his face were set in a mask of pure intensity. "You played like a maniac out there, Miller," Ken hissed, his chest heaving against Mark's. Mark didn't back down. He wrapped his arms around Ken's waist, pulling him so close their damp skin felt fused together through the thin fabric. "I told you, Ken, I don't like losing, especially not to you." "Then stop winning," Ken murmured, his gaze dropping to Mark's mouth. The sexual tension that had simmered on the court was now a physical roar in the small room. Ken leaned in, his nose brushing against Mark's, his half-Korean features softened by the shadows. "Because right now, I don't care about the scouts. I don't care about the score." Mark's hand slid up to the back of Ken's head, his fingers tangling in the dark, damp hair. "Then show me what you care about." Ken didn't hesitate. He crashed his lips against Mark's in a kiss that was part challenge, part surrender. It was deeper and more desperate than the night before, fueled by the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Mark let out a low groan, his back arching against the mats as Ken's hands wandered over his broad shoulders, tracing the hard muscle of his chest with a possessive heat. They tumbled back onto the soft surface of the high jump mats, the vinyl cool against their overheated skin. Mark hovered over Ken, his blonde hair falling forward as he watched Ken's eyes flutter shut. Ken's body was a map of perfection. American strength met with refined grace, and Mark wanted to memorize every inch of it. He trailed a line of burning kisses from Ken's jaw down to his collarbone, his tongue tasting the salt on Ken's skin. Ken's hands gripped Mark's biceps, his knuckles white. "Mark," he breathed, the name a shaky plea. Mark looked up, his blue eyes dark with a hunger that was entirely new. "We're from different worlds, Ken. Different schools. Everyone expects us to tear each other apart." Ken reached up, his thumb tracing the bruised line of Mark's bottom lip. "Let them watch us on the court." "But in here..." He pulled Mark's head back down, whispering against his skin, "In here, there are no rivals." The shadows of the equipment room swallowed them as they lost themselves in each other, the rivalry finally melting into a connection that neither of them was ready to let go of when the camp ended. The drive back to their respective cities felt like a countdown to something neither was ready to face. For weeks, the only world that existed was the gym in that cramped dorm room. Now, the reality of being the faces of rival programs began to set in. A week later, Mark was at a local park court, mindlessly shooting threes, when a familiar, sleek black car pulled up. Ken stepped out, looking effortlessly handsome, in a fitted black hoodie and joggers that highlighted his lean, athletic build. He didn't say a word. He just walked onto the court and waited for Mark to pass him the ball. Mark bounced it over, Ken caught it, pivoted, and sank a perfect jumper. "You're 3 hours away from your zip code, Ken," Mark said, his voice dropping an octave as he approached. "Risking a lot being seen in Westview territory." "I missed the competition," Ken replied. But his eyes said something else entirely. He stepped into Mark's space, the familiar heat between them reigniting instantly. "And I miss the way you look at me when you think no one's watching." Mark hooked a finger into the drawstring of Ken's hoodie, pulling him closer until their chests brushed. "People are always watching us, Ken, that's the problem." "Then let's go somewhere they aren't," Ken whispered. They retreated to Mark's car, parked in a secluded corner of the lot under the heavy shade of oak trees. The moment the doors closed, the tension snapped. Mark reached across the center console, grabbing the back of Ken's neck and pulling him into a kiss that tasted of longing and high stakes. Ken climbed over the console, straddling Mark's lap despite the cramped space, his strong, athletic legs framing Mark's hips. Ken's hand slid under Mark's shirt, his palms hot against Mark's skin. He traced the ridges of Mark's abs, his touch firm and deliberate. Mark let out a ragged breath, his hands finding purchase on Ken's lower back, pulling him down until there was no air left between them. "What are we doing, Ken?" Mark managed to gasp against Ken's neck, his lips grazing the pulse point that was fluttering wildly. Ken pulled back just enough to look Mark in the eye, his dark, striking features illuminated by the dim dashboard lights. "We're winning, Mark. For the first time, we're playing a game where we both get exactly what we want." He leaned back down, his mouth finding Mark's again, slower this time, more focused. The car was silent except for the sound of their breathing and the soft rustle of clothing as they explored the boundary between rivalry and something much more permanent. The rain began to pelt the roof of the car, turning the world outside into a blurred smear of gray and green, sealing them into a private, pressurized cabin. The space was cramped, but the restriction only made every touch feel more deliberate, more explosive. Mark's hands traveled from Ken's waist to the hem of his hoodie, pulling it up and over his head in one fluid motion. In the dim light, Ken's physique was a landscape of hard angles and shadow. The definition of his chest and shoulders highlighting the results of years of discipline. Mark's breath hitched. He reached out, his palms flat against Ken's warm, bare skin, feeling the steady, powerful thrum of an athlete's heart beneath his touch. "You have no idea," Mark rasped, his voice cracking with the weight of weeks of suppressed desire. "How much I've wanted to get you alone without a court between us." Ken didn't answer with words. He leaned forward, his weight pressing Mark back into the driver's seat. He grabbed Mark's wrists, pinning them lightly against the headrest, and began a slow, agonizing trail of kisses from Mark's jaw down to the hollow of his throat. Each touch was a calculated strike, finding every sensitive nerve. Mark's head fell back, a low, guttural groan escaping him that was muffled by the sound of the storm outside. "Then stop talking, Miller," Ken whispered against his skin, his breath hot and ragged. "Show me how much." Ken released Mark's wrists, only for Mark to immediately wrap his arms around Ken's neck, pulling him down into a kiss that was no longer a question, it was a demand. Their tongues clashed, a familiar rhythm of competition turning into a deep, soul-searing hunger. The friction of their bare chests rubbing together as Ken shifted on Mark's lap sent sparks through Mark's entire nervous system. Mark's hands wandered lower, his fingers digging into the muscle of Ken's thighs, pulling him flush against his hips. The physical evidence of their shared want was impossible to ignore. A hard, pulsing heat that made the air in the car feel like it was vibrating. Ken let out a sharp, jagged breath, his fingers tangling in Mark's blonde hair, tugging just enough to make Mark's eyes blow wide with a mix of surprise and pure, unadulterated need. They moved with a frantic, desperate grace, their bodies reacting to one another with the same intuition they had on the basketball court, but with stakes that were infinitely higher. Every touch, every muffled gasp, every inch of skin they explored felt like a victory and a surrender all at once. "Ken," Mark breathed, his eyes locked onto Ken's dark, burning gaze, "I'm not letting you go back to East Side tonight." Ken leaned down, his lips brushing Mark's ear, his voice a low, dangerous velvet. "I wasn't planning on it." The rain continued to hammer against the car, creating a rhythmic, isolating drumbeat that made the world outside feel miles away. Inside, the windows were completely fogged, trapping the heat of their bodies in a hazy, intimate cocoon. Ken's weight was a solid, comforting pressure against Mark, his bare chest slick with a light sheen of sweat despite the cool air outside. Mark's hands moved with a newfound urgency, sliding down from Ken's back to the waistband of his joggers. He pulled Ken closer, the friction of their movements sparking a fire that made Mark's head spin. Every time their skin met, it felt like a physical jolt, an addiction they had both been denying since the first time they faced off at center court. "I've spent 3 years trying to get in your head on the court," Ken whispered, his voice vibrating against Mark's collarbone as he trailed biting kisses toward his shoulder. "I never thought I'd end up wanting to be this close to you." Mark let out a jagged breath, his fingers digging into the firm muscle of Ken's glutes, pulling him flush against his hips. The contact was electric, a hard, pulsing reality that demanded more than just kisses. "Maybe that's why we played so hard," Mark managed to say, his voice thick with desire. "We were just trying to find a way to touch each other without admitting what it really was." Ken pulled back, his dark eyes searching Mark's in the dim light. The striking angles of his face were softened by a look of raw, unshielded hunger. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of Mark's jaw before sliding down to press against his bottom lip. Mark nipped at the skin, a playful but sharp reminder of the competitive streak that still ran through them. "Then stop talking about the past," Ken murmured. He shifted, his movements fluid and athletic even in the cramped driver's seat, pressing Mark back until there was no room left to retreat. He leaned down, his mouth finding Mark's in a deep, possessive kiss that tasted like surrender. Mark's hands wandered upward, mapping the ridges of Ken's ribs and the broad expanse of his chest. He admired the strength there, the power of a rival, the beauty of a lover. He flipped their positions with a sudden burst of strength, pinning Ken against the passenger side, his arms braced on either side of Ken's head. "Tonight, there's no East Side and no Westview," Mark whispered, his blue eyes dark and focused. "It's just us." Ken reached up, his fingers locking behind Mark's neck, pulling him down for another collision of lips and teeth. The intensity in the car reached a breaking point, a fever pitch of skin, breath, and the unspoken promise that this was only the beginning of a much longer game. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a sharp, golden light over the park. Inside the car, the air was heavy and still, the windows finally beginning to clear from the fog of the night before. Mark woke first, his arm draped over Ken's shoulder, feeling the steady, rhythmic rise and fall of Ken's chest. For a moment, the intensity of the previous hours felt like a dream until Ken stirred, his dark eyes fluttering open and immediately finding Mark's. A slow, sleepy smirk spread across Ken's face, a far cry from the cold, lethal stare he wore on the court. "You're still here, Miller," he rasped, his voice gravelly from sleep. "Didn't think I'd let you win that easily, did you?" Mark joked, though he didn't pull away. He traced the line of Ken's collarbone with his thumb, marveling at how natural it felt to be this close. They dressed in a comfortable, quiet rhythm, the competitive fire of the night replaced by a domestic sort of ease. But as Ken reached for the door handle to head to his own car, the reality of the season hit them. In 3 days, Westview and Eastside were scheduled for a televised regional matchup. The stakes were higher than ever. "See you Tuesday," Ken said, pausing as he stepped out. He looked back at Mark, his expression hardening into that of the elite captain his school expected him to be. "Don't expect me to go easy on you just because of..." Mark gripped the steering wheel, his blue eyes locking onto Ken's with a familiar spark. "I'd be insulted if you did. I want you at your best, Ken. I want to beat the real you." Ken leaned back in through the window, his hand catching the back of Mark's neck for one last, lingering kiss, a sharp contrast to the cold words they just exchanged. It was deep, possessive, and tasted of a secret they were both now desperate to keep. "You won't," Ken whispered against Mark's lips, "but I'll see you at center court." When Tuesday arrived, the gym was electric. The stands were packed and the scouts were lined up in the front row. As the teams walked out for warm-ups, the atmosphere was thick with the supposed hatred between the two stars. Mark stayed on his half of the court, draining threes with mechanical precision, while Ken executed a series of explosive dunks on the other end, his half-Korean features a mask of pure unshakable focus. They didn't look at each other until the captains were called to center court. Standing toe-to-toe, the cameras zoomed in on their faces. To the world, they looked like two warriors ready for battle. But as they shook hands, Mark felt the slight, deliberate pressure of Ken's thumb against his knuckles. A private signal that sent a jolt of heat straight to his core. The referee blew the whistle and tossed the ball into the air. The rivalry was back on, but the game had changed forever. The whistle blew and the gym exploded. The game lived up to the hype. A brutal, high-speed chess match between two athletes who knew each other's every move. Mark was a physical powerhouse, driving into the paint with a force that forced Ken to play the most aggressive defense of his life. Midway through the third quarter with the score tied, Ken intercepted a pass and streaked down the court for a breakaway layup. Mark was hot on his heels, closing the gap with desperate speed. Ken rose for the finish, his body twisting midair with that signature grace. But as he descended, his foot landed awkwardly on a teammate's shoe. A sickening pop echoed through the quiet that follows a missed shot. Ken's leg buckled and he went down hard, sliding across the hardwood until he hit the base of the hoop. The gym went silent. Mark skidded to a halt, his heart hammering against his ribs, not from the sprint, but from pure cold terror. He took 2 instinctive steps toward Ken, his hand reaching out before he remembered where he was. The cameras were on them. The scouts were watching. His teammates were already crowding around. Back up, Miller. Give him space, the East Side coach barked, shoving past Mark. Mark stood frozen at the free throw line, his knuckles white as he gripped his jersey. He watched from 10 feet away as the trainers huddled over Ken. He could see Ken's face, pale, jaw clenched in agony, sweat dripping down his sharp features. For a split second, Ken's eyes flickered up and met Mark's. There was no rivalry in that look, only a quiet, searing pain that made Mark want to burn the whole building down just to get to him. "He's out," the announcer's voice crackled over the PA system. "Kenji Oh is being taken off the floor." As the paramedics loaded Ken onto a stretcher, Mark felt a hand on his shoulder. It was his own coach. "Focus, Mark. We still have a game to win." "Yeah," Mark rasped, his throat feeling like it was full of glass. "Win." He played the rest of the game like a ghost. He scored, he rebounded, and he led Westview to a victory that felt like ashes in his mouth. The moment the final buzzer sounded, he didn't celebrate. While his teammates jumped and cheered, Mark sprinted for the locker room, threw on a hoodie to hide his jersey, and bolted for the back exit. He drove to the city hospital, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. When he reached the waiting room, he saw the East Side team bus parked outside and a cluster of Ken's teammates near the entrance. He couldn't go in. If the media saw the Westview captain hovering over the East Side Stars hospital bed, the story wouldn't be about the injury. It would be about them. Mark parked in the furthest corner of the lot, staring at the emergency room doors. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over Ken's name. "Please be okay. Please." He sat there for 3 hours, a popular hero to his school, but feeling like a coward in the dark. Watching the shadows of doctors move behind the glass, miles away from the only person he wanted to hold. The hospital hallway was a sterilized blur of white light and the hum of distant monitors. Mark pulled his hoodie low, his heart hammering harder than it ever had in the final seconds of a championship game. He dodged a group of East Side players heading for the exit, slipping through a service door and navigating the maze of the orthopedic wing until he found room 402. He pushed the door open just a crack. The room was dim, the only light coming from the street lamps outside. Ken was lying in the bed, his leg propped up in a heavy cast, his eyes closed. He looked unnervingly still, his sharp, handsome features pale against the white pillow. Mark felt a lump form in his throat. He stepped inside, the heavy scent of antiseptic making his stomach churn. He reached the side of the bed, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch Ken's arm, just to make sure he was warm, that he was real. "Ken," Mark whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I should have..." Suddenly, Ken's hand shot out, grabbing Mark's wrist with surprising strength. Mark let out a choked yelp, nearly jumping out of his skin. Ken's eyes snapped open, a mischievous glint dancing in the dark depths. A slow, effortless smirk spread across his face. "Gotcha, Miller." Mark froze, his heart practically vibrating against his ribs. You jerk. I thought you were unconscious. I thought your career was over." Ken let out a low, breathless laugh, pulling Mark closer until he was forced to lean over the bed rail. "The doctor said it's just a grade 2 sprain and a hairline fracture. 6 weeks in the cast, then physical therapy. I'll be back in time for the summer leagues." He tilted his head, his gaze softening as he took in Mark's disheveled state. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Were you actually crying, Mark?" "I was not crying," Mark snapped, though he didn't pull his hand away. He let out a long, shaky exhale, the terror of the last few hours finally draining out of him. "I've been sitting in the parking lot for 3 hours like a stalker because I couldn't walk in there with your team around." Ken's expression shifted, the prankster fading into something much more intimate. He reached up, his fingers brushing the hair out of Mark's eyes. "I knew you were there. I could feel you." Mark leaned down, his forehead resting against Ken's. The tension of the hospital, the rivalry, and the secret they were keeping all seemed to melt away in the quiet of the room. "Don't ever do that again. I don't care about the scouts or the schools. If you go down, I'm going down with you." Ken pulled Mark's head down the rest of the way, his lips meeting Mark's in a kiss that was slow, deep, and thick with relief. It tasted like a promise. Despite the cast and the hospital bed, the heat between them flared up instantly, a reminder that no injury could dampen the fire they had started. "Well," Ken whispered against Mark's mouth, his hands sliding up to the back of Mark's neck. "Since you're already here, and the nurses don't check in for another hour, why don't you make yourself useful and help me get comfortable?" Mark's blue eyes darkened, a smirk finally returning to his face. "I think I can manage that." The hour was late, and the hospital floor had fallen into a deep, rhythmic quiet. Inside room 402, the only light came from the bluish glow of the heart monitor and the moonlight spilling across Ken's bed. Mark had moved past the guardrails, sitting on the very edge of the mattress, his large frame careful not to disturb Ken's elevated leg. The relief of the prank had worn off, replaced by a heavy, pulsing intimacy. Ken's hand was tangled in the front of Mark's hoodie, pulling him down until their noses brushed. Up close, Ken's half-Korean features were striking. Even with the pallor of the hospital, his jawline was sharp enough to cut, and his dark eyes were clouded with a desire that wasn't muffled by the painkillers. "You're shaking, Mark," Ken whispered, his thumb tracing the shell of Mark's ear. "I told you, I was scared," Mark admitted, his voice a low rumble. He leaned in, his lips hovering just a fraction of an inch from Ken's. "I realized on that court that winning doesn't mean anything if you aren't there to talk trash to me afterward." Ken didn't wait for the rest of the sentence. He pulled Mark into a deep, bruising kiss that tasted of hospital mints and desperation. Mark groaned into Ken's mouth, his hands finding Ken's shoulders, feeling the hard, athletic muscle beneath the thin hospital gown. The contrast was intoxicating. The sterile, cold room and the white-hot heat radiating between them. Mark's hands wandered, sliding down Ken's sides, mapping the ribs and the flat, toned stomach he'd admired in the locker rooms. As his fingers grazed the tie of the hospital gown, Ken let out a sharp, jagged breath. "Careful, Miller," Ken teased breathlessly, though he arched his back into Mark's touch. "I'm an injured man." "You seem pretty active to me," Mark countered, his blue eyes darkening. He shifted, his weight pressing Ken back into the pillows. He began a trail of slow, deliberate kisses down Ken's neck, finding that one spot just below his ear that made Ken's fingers dig into Mark's biceps. The sexual tension that had been building since the camp, since that first game, seemed to concentrate in this tiny, quiet room. Every time a nurse's footsteps echoed in the hallway, they froze, hearts racing in tandem, only to melt back into each other the moment the sound faded. The risk of being caught, of the rivalry being exposed in the most scandalous way possible, only added fuel to the fire. 6 weeks, Ken murmured, his eyes hooded as he watched Mark. 6 weeks until I can move like I want to again. Mark leaned down, his lips brushing Ken's forehead before moving back to his mouth. "I can wait, but for tonight, I'm not leaving this room until the sun comes up." Mark settled in, resting his head on the edge of the pillow next to Ken's, their hands locked tightly together over the white sheets. They were still rivals to the world, but in the dark of room 402, they were finally on the same team. The heavy silence of the room was shattered by a sharp, rhythmic rapping on the wood. Both Mark and Ken froze, their eyes wide and hearts hammering against their ribs like trapped birds. "Ken, you awake, bro? It's Rio." Mark scrambled off the bed with the grace of a startled giraffe, nearly tripping over his own oversized sneakers. He straightened his hoodie, smoothed his messy blonde hair with a frantic hand, and lunged for a plastic guest chair on the far side of the room, snatching up a random get-well-soon card from the nightstand to look busy. The door swung open and Rio, Eastside's star point guard and Ken's best friend, marched in, still wearing his team warm-ups. He stopped dead, his gaze landing on the tall, unmistakable figure of the Westview captain. "Miller?" Rio's jaw dropped. "What are you doing here? Are you trying to finish the job?" You trying to kill my boy while he's down? Mark cleared his throat, his face turning a shade of red that matched the emergency exit sign. What? No. Don't be a psycho, Rio. My cousin's neighbor's kid is in the room next door. Appendix or something. Very tragic. I saw O on the door and figured I'd stop in to tell him how much easier my life is going to be now that I don't have to guard him for 6 weeks. Ken snorted from the bed, playing along with a weary roll of his eyes. He's just here to gloat, Rio. Typical Westview trash. Man, get out of here with that, Rio laughed, dismissively waving Mark off. He strode over to the bed, ignoring Mark entirely. Anyway, forget him. How you feeling, Ken-kun? Rio didn't just sit on the edge of the bed. He practically climbed onto it, throwing a thick arm around Ken's shoulders and pulling him into a rough brotherly headlock. You scared the life out of us, man. The team's a mess without you. I even brought you those spicy chips you like, though the nurse said I shouldn't. Mark watched from the corner, his grip tightening on the Get Well card until the cardstock began to crinkle. He felt a hot, sharp pang in his chest that had nothing to do with basketball. Rio was leaning in close, whispering a joke that made Ken laugh. That genuine, rich laugh that Mark thought was reserved only for their private moments. Rio reached out and ruffled Ken's hair, then playfully squeezed Ken's bicep. Don't worry, I'm gonna be here every day. I'll even help you bathe if I have to, bro. No shame between brothers, right? Ken grinned, leaning his head back against Rio's shoulder. You're an idiot, Rio. Mark's jaw tightened. He felt like an intruder in a world he didn't belong to. To the world, Rio was the one who was supposed to be by Ken's side, the loyal teammate, the best friend. Mark was just the rival who happened to be in the neighborhood. The jealousy was a physical weight, cold and suffocating. I'm leaving, Mark said abruptly, his voice sounding harsher than he intended. Rio looked up, surprised. Oh, you still here, Miller? Yeah, go on. We've got East Side business to discuss. Don't let the door hit your ego on the way out. Mark didn't look at Ken. He couldn't. If he did, he might say something stupid, or worse, he might try to pull Rio away. He turned on his heel and strode out, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. He walked down the hallway, his heart burning with a new kind of pain. He knew Rio didn't know Ken was bisexual, and he knew they were just friends. But seeing someone else touch Ken so freely, while he had to hide in the shadows, was more than he could handle. Mark paced the confines of his bedroom, the floorboards creaking under his heavy, restless strides. It was 3 a.m., and the silence of the house only made the noise in his head louder. He threw his phone onto the mattress, the screen glowing with 3 unread messages from Ken, but he couldn't bring himself to open them. Every time he closed his eyes, he didn't see the game-winning shot or the flashing lights of the stadium. He saw Rio. He saw the way Rio had draped an arm over Ken's shoulders like it was the most natural thing in the world. He saw the way Ken had laughed, that relaxed, easygoing laugh, while Mark had been forced to stand in the corner like a stranger. Just friends, Mark muttered to himself, rubbing his face with his hands. I know they're just friends. But the logic didn't stop the stinging in his chest. It wasn't just about Rio, it was about the right to be there. Rio could walk into that hospital room whenever he wanted. Rio could tell jokes, bring snacks, and touch Ken's arm without a single person in the world questioning him. Meanwhile, Mark, the guy who had held Ken while he breathed through the pain just an hour earlier, had to invent a story about a fake neighbor's kid just to stand in the same zip code. He felt like a ghost in Ken's real life. He sat on the edge of his bed, his muscles coiled tight. He thought about his own teammates, how they'd react if they knew. He thought about the East Side fans who hated his guts. The secrecy, which had felt like an adventurous thrill at the camp, now felt like a cage. He snatched his phone up again, his thumb hovering over the block button in a fit of irrational pique, before he settled for just staring at Ken's contact photo. Ken, 2:14 a.m. Mark, stop being an idiot. Rio's literally like a brother to me. You know that. Ken, 2:30 a.m. Are you really jealous of him? He doesn't even know. Ken, 2:45 a.m. Answer me. My leg hurts and I'm bored. Don't leave me on red. Mark growled, tossing the phone back onto the nightstand. I'm not jealous, he lied to the empty room. He stood up and went to his weight bench, needing to burn off the toxic energy. He started doing high-intensity presses, the iron clanking in the dark. With every rep, he pictured Rio's hand on Ken's shoulder. Clank. He pictured the way they looked like they belonged together. Clank. He was the Westview golden boy. He was supposed to be the one in control. But sitting here in the dark, sweating and overthinking, he realized he wasn't just Ken's rival anymore. He was falling. And the fact that he had to do it in secret was starting to tear him apart. The next morning, Mark's phone buzzed on the nightstand with a persistence that finally broke through his wall of stubbornness. He reached for it with a groan, his muscles aching from the midnight workout. It was a photo. He tapped it open. It was a mirror selfie Ken had taken from his hospital bed. He was shirtless, the white sheets draped low around his hips, highlighting the sharp definition of his V-taper and the lean muscle of his chest. His dark hair was a mess, and he was giving the camera a look that was half deadpan, half invitation. Ken. Rio just left to get me a burger. I'm bored and my room is very, very empty. Still sulking? Mark felt the heat rush to his face, his anger evaporating instantly, replaced by a heavy thrum of desire. He typed back, his thumbs flying across the screen. Mark, I'm not sulking. I just don't like seeing other people all over what's mine. Ken, mine? That's a big word for a guy who ran out of the room like he saw a ghost. Mark growled, tossing his gym bag over his shoulder. He couldn't stay away. The jealousy was still there, a dull ache in his gut. But the need to see Ken, to reclaim his territory, was stronger. He drove back to the hospital, but this time he didn't use the front entrance. He found a service stairwell and climbed 4 flights of stairs, slipping into the hallway just as a nurse turned the corner. He waited until the coast was clear and ducked into room 402. Ken was sitting up, the hospital gown hanging loosely off one shoulder. He looked up as the door clicked shut, a slow, triumphant smirk spreading across his handsome face. Took you long enough, Miller. Mark didn't say a word. He crossed the room in 3 strides, leaning over the bed and catching Ken's face in his hands. He kissed him with a ferocity that made Ken gasp, his tongue seeking out Ken's in a way that was possessive and raw. Mark's hand slid down to Ken's bare shoulders, his grip firm, as if he were trying to leave marks that Rio would never see. You're mine, Mark breathed against Ken's lips, his blue eyes dark and intense. On the court, off the court. I don't care who thinks they're your best friend. Ken reached up, his fingers locking behind Mark's neck, pulling him back down for more. Took you long enough to admit it, Ken whispered, his voice a low, rough velvet. Now lock the door. We have 40 minutes before Rio comes back with that burger. 2 weeks of covert operations and late-night hospital visits had finally come to an end. Ken's cast had been traded for a heavy-duty walking boot and a pair of crutches, but he moved with that same athletic confidence that had always driven Mark crazy. When Mark opened his front door that Saturday afternoon, his heart did a literal jump cut. Ken was standing there, leaning casually on his crutches, wearing a vintage, oversized leather jacket and torn jeans. His half-Korean features were illuminated by the porch light, looking more like a high-end fashion model than a recovering power forward. Nice place, Miller, Ken said, his dark eyes scanning the entryway. A bit more golden boy than I expected. Mark grabbed Ken's gym bag, his hand lingering on Ken's arm as he guided him inside. Shut up and get in here. My mom and sisters are out for the day, so you don't have to hide in the closet. The moment the door clicked shut, the playful banter evaporated. Mark dropped the bag and pinned Ken against the hallway wall, careful of his braced leg. He missed this. The proximity, the scent of Ken's cologne mixed with the faint smell of the outdoors. He kissed Ken with a hunger that had been building for 14 days, his hands sliding up to cup Ken's sharp jawline. Ken groaned into the kiss, dropping one crutch to wrap his free arm around Mark's neck pulling him flush against his chest. The friction of their denim jeans and the heat of their bodies made the hallway feel like it was shrinking. "I miss this," Ken breathed against Mark's lips, his voice a low, vibrating rasp. "Being in a room where I don't have to pretend I want to shove you into a locker." "You still want to shove me into a locker," Mark teased, his thumbs tracing the line of Ken's cheekbones. "You just want to do other things once we're in there." They made their way to Mark's room, a space filled with basketball trophies and posters that suddenly felt too small for the energy between them. Ken sat on the edge of the bed, stretching his braced leg out, while Mark stood between his knees. The sexual tension was thick, a physical weight in the room. Mark reached down, slowly unzipping Ken's leather jacket, revealing the toned, muscular chest beneath a thin white tank top. Ken reached up, his fingers hooking into Mark's belt loops, pulling him closer until their foreheads rested together. "Rio called me 5 times today," Ken whispered, a smirk playing on his lips. "He thinks I'm at physical therapy." Mark stiffened for a second, the old jealousy flickering, but Ken caught his chin, forcing him to look into those dark, intense eyes. "Forget him, Mark. I'm here, with you." Mark smiled, a genuine, soft expression he only showed when they were alone. He leaned down, his lips grazing the sensitive skin of Ken's neck. "Good, because I have 2 weeks of missed time to make up for, and I don't plan on wasting a single second." The bedroom was thick with a heavy, magnetic silence, as Mark slowly pulled his shirt over his head. His athletic frame silhouetted against the afternoon sun streaming through the blinds. Ken sat on the edge of the mattress, his breath hitching as he watched Mark's muscles ripple. 2 weeks of distance had turned their mutual craving into something almost unbearable. Mark moved between Ken's knees, his hands sliding firmly up Ken's thighs, stopping just where the hem of his shorts met his skin. He leaned down, his lips ghosting over Ken's ear. "I've spent every night for 14 days thinking about having you right here," Mark rasped, his voice dropping to a gravelly, intimate low. Ken reached up, his fingers digging into Mark's shoulders, pulling him down into a kiss that tasted of pure, unadulterated hunger. As they tangled together on the bed, the friction of their skin and the weight of their bodies created a fever pitch of tension. Mark's hands became more purposeful, his touch moving with a possessive heat that signaled he wanted more than just a fleeting moment. He wanted to claim every part of Ken. To finally cross that ultimate line they had danced around since the camp, Mark began to shift, his movements turning slower and more deliberate as he prepared to take things to that final, deepest level of intimacy. He looked into Ken's eyes, his own blue gaze dark with a protective, intense desire to make Ken completely his. But as Mark's weight shifted and his hand moved to guide them toward that final surrender, Ken suddenly tensed. A sharp, involuntary hiss of pain escaped his teeth, and he placed a firm hand on Mark's chest, gently but firmly holding him back. "Mark, wait," Ken breathed, his chest heaving as he struggled to find his voice. Mark froze instantly, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Did I hurt you? Is it the leg?" Ken leaned back against the pillows, a frustrated but soft smile flickering on his handsome features. He gestured toward the heavy walking boots still guarding his ankle. "It's everything. Between the leg and the fact that I've never actually gone this far before, Mark. I want this. I want you. But I'm not ready for that yet. Not while I can barely stand on my own 2 feet." The realization hit Mark like a physical wave. The tough, lethal rival on the court was giving him a piece of himself that no one else had ever touched. The golden boy softened completely, his protective instincts overriding his own burning need. Mark leaned down, pressing a tender, lingering kiss to Ken's forehead. "Hey, look at me." He waited until Ken's dark eyes met his. "We have all the time in the world. I'm not going anywhere. If we just stay like this for the rest of the day, that's more than enough for me." Ken let out a long, shaky exhale of relief, his fingers relaxing their grip on Mark's chest. He pulled Mark back down into a kiss, this one slower, sweeter, but still pulsing with the promise of what was to come when the time was finally right. They lay there, limbs entwined in the golden light, two rivals who had found something far more valuable than a championship trophy. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long amber shadows across Mark's driveway. Ken leaned on his crutches, his leather jacket slung over one shoulder, looking every bit the defiant rival again. But as he looked at Mark, the steel in his eyes softened. "My ride's here," Ken said, gesturing to the black car pulling up at the curb. He stepped closer, the scent of Mark's cologne still clinging to his skin. "Don't get too used to having me around, Miller. From tomorrow, I'm back in the gym. My PT says I can start light drills." Mark reached out, his hand lingering on Ken's waist for one last hidden squeeze. "Good, because I'm tired of playing against ghosts. I want the real Kenji Oh back on the court so I can beat him properly." Ken smirked, a sharp, handsome expression that made Mark's heart race. "In your dreams." He leaned in, stealing one final searing kiss that tasted of promise and salt, before turning and navigating his way to the car. The weeks that followed were a grueling blur of sweat, squeaking sneakers, and the roar of coaches. The regional finals were approaching, and the media was already spinning the narrative: the return of the king versus the golden boy. With their schedules packed from 5 o'clock a.m. film sessions to late-night conditioning, they couldn't risk meeting. The rivalry had to look convincing. But in the quiet moments between drills, their phones became their lifeline. The Mark, 11:15 p.m. "Just saw a clip of your shooting practice. You're still leaning too far left on your jumper. I'm gonna strip that ball so fast on Tuesday, Ken, 11:15 p.m. Maybe I'm just leaning that way so I can see your frustrated face better when the ball goes in. Focus on your free throws, Miller. You looked shaky today." Mark, 11:20 p.m. "I'm only shaky because I'm thinking about what I'm gonna do to you after the game. The locker room at the neutral arena has very sturdy doors, Ken." Ken would stare at the screen in the East Side locker room, a flush creeping up his neck that he'd blame on the workout. Ken, 11:25 p.m. "Keep talking. It'll make it more fun when I lock you down. Also, I'm wearing that hoodie you left in my bag. It smells like you. I hate it. I'm wearing it to sleep." Mark, 11:27 p.m. "You're a terrible liar. Sleep well, rival. See you at the top." As the days counted down to the big match, the tension between them stretched thin like a guitar string. Every hateful quote they gave to the school paper was a coded message to the other. The world saw two enemies and preparing for war. But under the jerseys and the hype, two hearts were beating in a synchronized rhythm of anticipation. The week of the regional finals turned into a media circus. For the first time, the Mark versus Ken narrative broke out of high school sports and into the mainstream. Mark spent his mornings on a professional soundstage. Between grueling practice sessions, he was the face of a new national sports drink campaign. He stood under the blinding studio lights, his muscular frame glistening with artificial sweat, palming a basketball for the cameras. He looked like the perfect American hero, composed, powerful, and untouchable. But every time the director yelled, "Cut!" Mark's eyes immediately flickered to the monitor in the corner of the studio. On the screen, a sports news ticker was running a segment. "Exclusive, Kenji Oh speaks on the comeback." The footage cut to Ken sitting in a high-end TV studio, looking dangerously handsome in a sharp, tailored blazer that emphasized his broad shoulders. His half-Korean features were chiseled under the stage lights, his expression a mask of cool, lethal confidence. "Mark Miller's a great player," Ken told the interviewer, his voice smooth and steady. "But he's used to being the golden boy. He's used to everyone stepping aside. I'm the only one who knows exactly how to make him lose focus. On Tuesday, I'm not just playing a game. I'm taking back what's mine." Mark gripped the basketball so hard his knuckles turned white. He knew what Ken meant by "what's mine," but to the millions watching, it sounded like a declaration of war. Back at the East Side training facility, Ken was equally distracted. During his rare breaks, he sat in the darkened film room, but he wasn't watching game tape of his own plays. He was watching the behind-the-scenes clips of Mark's new commercial that had leaked online. He watched the way Mark's blonde hair caught the light, the way his jaw tightened when he moved. The silence between them was deafening. They were both so submerged in the machinery of their own success, the sponsorships, the interviews, the mandatory team lockdowns, that they didn't have a single second for a private call. Even their texts had dried up, replaced by the crushing weight of expectation. Ken saw a billboard of Mark on his way to the arena, a massive, towering image of his rival looking down at the city. Mark saw Ken on every sports channel, talking about how he was going to shut Miller down. They were ghosts to each other, communicating only through the glow of television screens and the headlines of newspapers. The sexual tension and the secret intimacy of the hospital room felt like a different lifetime. Now there was only the noise of the crowd, the flashing of cameras, and the cold, hard reality that in 48 hours, they would have to step onto the court and pretend to hate the only person who truly understood them. The following week was a blur of early morning sprints and late-night film sessions. Between the roar of the crowd and the constant flash of cameras, Mark and Ken hadn't exchanged a single word in 14 days. The silence was starting to feel like a physical weight. To blow off some steam, Mark's team headed to an upscale lounge in the city to celebrate his teammate's 21st birthday. The music was thumping, and for the first time in weeks, Mark felt like he could breathe. He was leaning against the bar, a drink in hand, his broad shoulders filling out a casual black polo, when the energy in the room shifted. High-pitched screams erupted near the entrance. A crush of fans and security pushed into the lounge, surrounding a petite, stunning girl with long, flowing hair and a face that looked like it was carved from porcelain. "Who's that?" Mark shouted over the music, nudging his teammate. "Are you living under a rock, Miller?" His friend laughed. "That's Sophia, the lead from Star-Crossed. She's the biggest teen drama star in the country right now. Every guy in America is obsessed with her." Mark watched, indifferent, until the crowd parted and Sophia began walking directly toward him. She had a confident, playful glint in her eyes. When she reached him, she tilted her head back, looking up at the 6'4" athlete. "Hi, Mark," she said, her voice easily cutting through the noise. Mark blinked, caught off guard. "Hi, I know exactly who you are," she interrupted with a dazzling smile. "I'm a huge fan. I never miss a Westview game." The rest of the team went wild, hooting and whistling as Mark and Sophia began to talk. She was charming and funny, leaning in close to hear him over the music. Mark enjoyed the conversation. It was a welcome distraction from the stress of the upcoming finals. When the party finally wound down and they stepped outside into the cool night air, a wall of paparazzi was waiting. Flashbulbs exploded like lightning. Sophia slipped her arm through Mark's as they navigated toward their cars, the cameras capturing every second of the Golden Boy and the America's Sweetheart together. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. New power couple, Mark Miller and Sophia spotted leaving club together. Across the city, Ken was at the East Side Elite Fitness Gym, finishing a brutal set of weighted squats. His muscles were pumped, sweat dripping down his sharp jawline. He grabbed a towel, glancing up as the giant TV in the corner switched to a celebrity gossip segment. Images of Mark and Sophia flashed on the screen. Mark, looking handsome and protective, Sophia smiling up at him. "Man, Miller is living the dream," Rio said, leaning on a treadmill and staring at the screen in awe. "First a national championship run, now he's dating the hottest girl on TV. I'm officially jealous." Ken's grip on his towel tightened until his knuckles turned white. His heart, which had been steadied through 100 sprints, suddenly felt like it was being squeezed by a cold hand. He watched the way Sophia's hand rested on Mark's arm in the photo, and a dark, hot surge of jealousy flared up in his gut. Without a word, Ken stepped over to the wall, snatched the remote from the charging station, and pointed it at the screen. Click. The TV went black. "Hey, I was watching that," Rio protested. "We're here to train, not watch fairy tales," Ken snapped, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He turned and headed back to the weights, his eyes burning. He didn't care about Sophia. He cared that while he was sleeping in Mark's hoodie, Mark was on the front page with the world's most beautiful woman. The rivalry wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was war. The silence between Mark and Ken stretched into a third week, but the noise surrounding them had never been louder. Every time Mark stepped onto the Westview practice court, the bleachers weren't just filled with scouts. They were flanked by Sophia's security detail. Sophia sat in the front row, wearing an oversized Westview jersey with Miller emblazoned across the back. She'd bring him expensive sports drinks and wait by the locker room door, her hand resting familiarly on his bicep as cameras caught every intimate moment. To the public, they were the ultimate golden couple, the star athlete and the TV princess. Mark went along with it, partly because the team's PR encouraged the distraction, and partly because he was too exhausted to fight the whirlwind. But every time Sophia leaned in to whisper something in his ear, Mark wasn't thinking about her. He was wondering if a certain half-Korean rival was watching the same news cycle he was. He didn't have to wonder for long. Across town at the East Side gym, the atmosphere was suffocating. Ken had become a ghost on the court. Faster, stronger, and infinitely more silent. He didn't joke with Rio anymore. He didn't complain about the drills. He just worked until his lungs burned, and his jersey was soaked through with sweat. Every time a teammate pulled out a phone and whispered about the latest Mark and Sophia sighting, Ken's crossover became more violent, his dunks more thunderous. He'd see the photos on the locker room TV. Mark smiling, Sophia laughing, the two of them looking like a perfect, polished dream. "Man, they're actually cute together," one of the freshmen whispered, holding up a tabloid. "They say she's attending the regional finals as his special guest." Ken didn't say a word. He walked over, snatched the tabloid out of the kid's hand, and threw it into the trash can without breaking stride. "Get on the line," Ken barked, his voice like cold iron. "Sprints, now." "But Ken, we just finished." "I said now," Ken roared, the frustration finally boiling over. He pushed himself harder than anyone else, his heart hammering a rhythmic, angry beat. If he wants to play the golden boy with her, let him, Ken thought, his jaw tight as he sprinted. But on that court, there are no cameras and no starlets. There's just me. Ken was no longer just training to win a trophy. He was training to tear the smile off Mark Miller's face. He wanted to look Mark in the eye at center court and see if the golden boy still felt so perfect when he realized he was about to lose the only thing that actually mattered. The countdown to the finals hit 48 hours. The world was waiting for a romance, but Ken was preparing for a slaughter. The neon lights of the club pulsed in sync with the heavy bass, creating an atmosphere that felt worlds away from the sterile gym floors. Sophia was in her element, her hand possessively on Mark's waist as she introduced him to her circle of famous friends. "Mark, this is my world," she whispered, leaning in so close her perfume clouded his senses. Meanwhile, at the East Side facility, Rio burst into the locker room, holding his phone like a holy relic. "Guys, Sophia's fan club just leaked her location. She's at Vibe. That's only 10 minutes away. We have to go. I need that selfie." Ken stood by his locker, pulling on a clean shirt. "No, we have a game in 2 days." "Come on, Cap, 1 hour. The whole team is going," Rio pleaded. And before Ken could protest further, he was being shoved toward the exit. When the East Side squad walked into the club, the VIP section was already a spectacle. Ken's eyes scanned the crowd and locked onto a shock of blonde hair. There was Mark, looking every bit the celebrity boyfriend, caught in a slow, lingering dance with Sophia. As the music swelled, Mark leaned down, and they shared a deep, public kiss that sent the paparazzi's flashes into a frenzy. A cold, sharp blade of ice pierced Ken's chest. He didn't flinch, but his jaw set into a hard, dangerous line. Wow, they really are the real deal. Rio muttered, disappointed. Ken didn't answer. Instead, he turned to a stunning girl at the edge of their booth who had been eyeing him since he walked in. "Wanna dance?" he asked, his voice low and devoid of emotion. For the next hour, it was a psychological war. Mark would glance over and see Ken pulled into the orbit of a flirty stranger. Their bodies moving close, Ken's hand resting on the girl's hip in a way that looked deliberate. Every time Mark looked, Ken was looking away, acting as if Mark didn't exist. Every time Ken stole a glance, he saw Mark and Sophia laughing, lost in their own gilded world. "Let's get out of here," Sophia whispered into Mark's ear, her eyes suggestive. "I have a suite upstairs." Mark felt a hollow ache in his gut, but the sight of Ken with that girl pushed him over the edge. "Yeah," he rasped. "Let's go." As they disappeared toward the private elevators, Ken felt the air leave his lungs. He abruptly pulled away from the girl he was dancing with. "I'm done. I'm going home." "Already? What about the girl?" Rio asked, confused. "I said, I'm done," Ken snapped, walking out into the cold night air alone. Back at his apartment, the silence was deafening. Ken stripped off his clothes and stepped into the shower, the scalding water turning his skin red. He leaned his forehead against the cold tiles, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He closed his eyes, but he didn't see the girl from the bar. He didn't see the championship trophy. He saw Mark, the way Mark looked in the dim light of the car, the way Mark's hands felt on his skin in the hospital room. He reached down, his hand moving in a frustrated, desperate rhythm. Every groan that escaped him was a name he couldn't say out loud. He let his imagination take him back to the dorm room, back to the only place where they weren't rivals, until the tension finally snapped, leaving him shaking and hollow under the spray of the water. He was alone, and in 48 hours, he had to face the man he hated and loved more than anyone else in the world. The suite was quiet, the city lights flickering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Sophia was beautiful, and any other guy would have considered this the peak of their life. But as Mark leaned over her, his mind was a chaotic static. Every time he closed his eyes to focus, he didn't see Sophia's smile, he saw Ken's sharp jawline. He didn't feel the softness of the bed. He felt the cramped leather seats of his car and the heat of an athlete's grip. The rhythm was wrong, the energy was off. Mark finally pulled back, his chest heaving, his heart heavy with a guilt he couldn't explain. I'm sorry, Sophia, Mark rasped, sitting on the edge of the bed and burying his face in his hands. I'm just not in the right headspace. The game, the stress. I'm sorry. Sophia sat up, pulling the silk sheets around her. She didn't look angry. She looked observant. It's okay, Mark. We don't have to force it. The next day, the routine continued. Sophia showed up to practice, and they grabbed lunch at a quiet bistro nearby. The paparazzi caught them smiling, but inside, the air was thick with things unsaid. Mark, Sophia said, putting down her fork and looking him straight in the eye. Do you have something you want to tell me? Mark looked down at his plate, his throat tight. About last night, I'm really sorry. We can try again. I really like you, Sophia. You know that. Sophia reached across the table and took his hand, her expression surprisingly tender. I know you do, and I love you too, in a way. But I think we're not compatible like that. And that's okay. We can still be friends. No, I want to try, Mark insisted, his voice desperate. I can make it work. Mark, she said softly, cutting him off. Maybe you're just looking for something else. Or someone else. Mark froze. What do you mean? Sophia leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. Have you ever tried being with a man? The question hit Mark like a physical blow. Suddenly, the dam broke. A single tear escaped and rolled down his cheek, followed by another. He didn't even try to wipe them away. The images of Ken, the way they laughed in the hospital, the way Ken looked at him at center court, the raw, electric connection they shared, all came rushing back in a flood of technicolor. He realized he had been miserable every second he wasn't with him. Yes, Mark whispered, his voice trembling. Sophia didn't flinch. She just squeezed his hand. How was it? Did you like it? Mark closed his eyes, a small, bittersweet smile breaking through the tears as he remembered the intensity of Ken's gaze. I think I liked it more to be the whole, he admitted, his voice barely audible but honest for the first time in weeks. Sophia let out a bright, genuine laugh that shattered the tension. Oh my God, same, she giggled, wiping a tear of her own. See, we really are compatible, just as besties. They sat there for an hour, the power couple mask finally shattered. They promised to keep each other's secrets, agreeing to keep up the dating appearance for the cameras to keep the heat off Mark. But knowing that behind closed doors, they were now each other's closest confidants. Go win that game, Mark, Sophia said, winking at him as they left. And go get your man. The atmosphere inside the neutral arena was suffocating. 10,000 fans screamed. But for Mark and Ken, the world had shrunk to the four corners of the hardwood. Ken was playing like a man possessed. His face was a mask of cold, chiseled stone, his dark eyes never once meeting Mark's with anything other than a lethal, competitive glare. Every time they collided in the paint, Ken shoved Mark off with a little extra force, his jaw tight. He was still simmering from the images of Mark and Sophia, the jealousy fueling a performance that had the scouts scribbling furiously. Focus, Miller, Ken hissed as they lined up for a free throw, his voice low and jagged. Go back to your movie star. You're losing this one. Mark didn't snap back. He just looked at Ken, really looked at him, with a calm, steady gaze that seemed to frustrate Ken even more. I'm not losing anything today, Ken. Not the game and not you. The final 2 minutes were a physical war. With Eastside up by 1, Mark drove the lane, his broad shoulders shielding the ball. He felt Ken's heat right behind him, a shadow he couldn't shake. Mark pivoted, a deceptive move he'd practiced 1,000 times, and drew the foul as he sank a layup. The whistle blew. The crowd erupted. Mark stepped to the line. He took a deep breath, his blue eyes flicking to where Sophia sat in the front row. She gave him a subtle, encouraging nod, their secret signal. He sank both free throws. Final score, Westview 88, Eastside 80. The buzzer blared, a long, deafening drone. The Westview bench stormed the court, a sea of white and gold jerseys swallowing Mark whole. They were the regional champions. Confetti exploded from the rafters, stinging the air. Through the chaos of jumping teammates and screaming fans, Mark's eyes searched for one person. He found him standing near the east side bench. Ken looked devastated, shoulders slumped, chest heaving, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. He looked like he wanted to vanish. Rio tried to put an arm around him, but Ken shook him off, turning to head toward the tunnel. He didn't want to see Mark celebrate. He didn't want to see the golden boy have it all. But Mark wasn't celebrating with his team. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the cameras and the teammates grabbing at his jersey. He intercepted Ken just as he reached the mouth of the dark tunnel, away from the brightest lights. "Ken, wait!" Mark shouted over the roar. Ken spun around, his face twisted in a mix of fury and heartbreak. "What do you want, Miller? You won! Go take your trophy and your girlfriend and get out of my sight!" Mark didn't back down. He stepped into Ken's space, so close their sweaty jerseys brushed. "Sophia and I aren't dating, Ken. We're just friends. Best friends. She knows everything." Ken froze, his breath hitching. "What?" "I don't want the trophy if I have to hate you to get it," Mark whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out, his hand hovering near Ken's arm, desperate to bridge the distance. "I missed you. Every single second." Ken looked at him, the anger in his eyes slowly dissolving into a raw, vulnerable longing. The noise of the stadium faded into the background. They were rivals who had just finished a war, standing in the shadows of the tunnel, finally telling the truth. The victory party was a chaotic blur of bass-heavy music, clinking glasses, and the overlapping cheers of both Westview and Eastside players. Despite the loss, The atmosphere was thick with the adrenaline of a season ended. But while Rio was busy leading a shot glass toast at the center of the room, Ken felt like the walls were closing in. He slipped away, stepping onto the secluded stone balcony that overlooked the city's shimmering skyline. The cool night air hit his damp skin, a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat of the club. He gripped the railing, his knuckles white, his mind still replaying the final buzzer. A shadow fell over him. He didn't need to turn around to know the scent of the detergent and sweat that followed Mark Miller everywhere. "The MVP is missing his own party," Mark said softly, stepping up beside him. He didn't look at the view, he only looked at Ken. "I'm not the MVP, you are," Ken replied, his voice a low, tired rasp. "Go back inside, Mark. Go celebrate it with your fans." "I'm done celebrating with them," Mark said. He reached out, his fingers grazing Ken's jaw, turning his face so their eyes met. The tension that had been building through weeks of silence and jealousy suddenly surged. Mark leaned in, his breath warm against Ken's lips, his eyes fluttering shut as he moved to finally reclaim the intimacy they'd lost. Ken jerked back, his hand flat against Mark's chest. "Stop," he breathed, his eyes darting toward the glass doors where shadows of partygoers shifted. "Mark, stop. We're in public. Someone will see. You have a reputation to keep, and I can't do this right now." Mark's face fell, a pained look crossing his features. "Ken, I told you, it's different now. I don't care who sees." He reached out again, desperate to close the gap. But Ken felt distant. His energy was cold, his mind clearly 1,000 miles away. He looked preoccupied, his gaze flickering nervously as if he were waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then, the sharp, shrill ring of a phone cut through the quiet. Ken pulled his phone from his pocket. His face went ghostly pale as he saw the international caller ID. He answered with a trembling, "Yoboseo?" Mark watched in silence as Ken's expression shattered. The phone slipped slightly in his grip and his breath hitched in a way that sounded like a physical break. After a few hushed, panicked words in Korean, Ken hung up. He looked at Mark, but his eyes were vacant, filmed over with a sudden, agonizing grief. "My father," Ken whispered, his voice sounding small and fragile for the first time. "He's gone. A heart attack. I have to go. I have to go back to Korea. Tonight." Mark reached out, his heart breaking for the man standing in front of him. "Ken, wait. Let me help you. Let me..." But Ken was already moving. He didn't let Mark touch him. He didn't say goodbye. He simply turned and vanished into the crowd, leaving Mark standing alone on the balcony while the muffled sound of the party continued behind him. The distance between them suddenly becoming an ocean. The silence that followed Ken's departure was louder than any stadium crowd Mark had ever faced. A week passed, then 10 days. Mark's phone became an extension of his hand, a constant source of anxiety. He sent messages every hour, some filled with comfort, others with desperate pleas just to know Ken was eating or sleeping. He called at 3 a.m., calculating the time difference to Seoul, listening to the rhythmic, foreign ringing until it clicked over to a voicemail greeting in a language he didn't understand. "Mark, day 3. Ken, please, I'm so sorry about your dad. I'm here, just tell me you're okay." "Mark, day 7. I'm still wearing your hoodie. It doesn't smell like you anymore. I miss you so much it hurts to breathe." "Mark, day 10. Are you coming back? Just give me a sign. Anything." There was no read receipt, no typing bubbles, just a cold digital void. Mark threw himself into his practices with a ferocity that bordered on self-destruction. He was the first one in the gym and the last one to leave, pushing his body until his muscles screamed, hoping the physical pain would drown out the hollow ache in his chest. His teammates stayed out of his way. The golden boy had turned into a silent, focused machine, his blue eyes hard and distant. Sophia was the only one who saw through the mask. She sat on the sidelines, watching him run suicide drills until he collapsed. "He's grieving, Mark," she said softly one afternoon, handing him a water bottle. In some cultures, when you lose a parent, you shut everything else out. It's not about you, it's about him surviving. Mark wiped the sweat from his forehead, his hand trembling slightly. "I know, but I feel like I'm losing him to a world I don't know. I feel like the longer he stays there, the more he forgets who we were in that hospital room." He sat on the bleachers, staring at his lock screen, a blurry photo he'd taken of Ken sleeping in the car. It was the only thing keeping him grounded. He didn't care about the championships or the scouts anymore. He just wanted to hear Ken's voice, even if it was to tell him to go away. As the second week came to a close, Mark was sitting in his darkened room, the glow of his phone the only light. He typed one last message, his thumb hovering over the send button. "Mark, I'll wait for you. I don't care if it takes months. I'm not going anywhere, Kenji." He hit send and curled up on his bed, clutching the worn fabric of Ken's hoodie to his chest, praying that somewhere across the ocean, Ken was feeling the same tether pulling him back home. The flight to Incheon was a 14-hour blur of gray clouds and silent tears. When Ken finally stepped off the plane, the cold, damp air of Seoul didn't feel like home. It felt like a shroud. The apartment he grew up in was smaller than he remembered, suffocatingly quiet, without his father's steady presence. But the silence didn't last. The moment Ken stepped through the door, the stench of stale soju and cigarettes hit him. His older brother, Daeshim, was slumped on the floor, surrounded by empty green bottles. He didn't offer a hug or a word of comfort. He didn't even stand up. "The prodigal son returns," Daeshim sneered, his voice thick with alcohol. He held out a trembling hand. "I hope you brought your wallet, Kenji. The funeral costs aren't going to pay themselves, and I'm tapped out." Ken dropped his duffel bag, his chest tightening with a familiar, burning rage. "Is that all you have to say? Our father is dead, and you're asking for money for more poison?" "Don't you dare judge me!" Daeshim roared. Scrambling to his feet and stumbling toward Ken, he poked a finger hard into Ken's chest. "Where were you? While I was here, watching him get weaker every day, you were over in America, chasing a ball like a child. You chose a nonsense sport over your own blood. I was sending money home. I was trying to build a future for us," Ken shouted back, his voice cracking. "You were supposed to look after him, Daeshim. You were the one here. Why didn't you call me sooner? Why did you let him get this bad?" "Because he didn't want you to know," Daeshim spat, his eyes bloodshot and hateful. "He missed you every single day, but he told me not to ruin your big dream. He died calling your name, Kenji, not mine, yours, and you weren't even there to hear it." The words felt like physical blows. Ken retreated to the small balcony, the same place he used to hide as a kid when his mother was still alive, and the world felt safe. He leaned against the railing, staring out at the neon lights of the city, feeling utterly, devastatingly alone. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a constant, rhythmic vibration. He pulled it out and saw the notifications. Mark, 47 unread messages. Mark, 12 missed calls. He stared at Mark's name. He thought about the blonde hair, the bright blue eyes, and the way Mark looked at him like he was the only person in the world who mattered. In America, he was a star. He was loved. He was Mark's. But here in the wreckage of his family, he felt like a failure. A ghost. "How can I talk to you, Mark?" Ken thought, his thumb hovering over a photo of them at the camp. "You're the golden boy. Your life is perfect. My life is a graveyard and a brother who hates me." He couldn't bring himself to type a reply. He couldn't let Mark see this broken version of him. It felt like if he reached out to Mark, he'd just drag him down into the dark, cold water he was drowning in. Ken turned off his phone and tossed it onto the bed, the screen going black. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until his knees hit his chest, and finally, in the dark of his childhood home, the lethal rival broke down and sobbed. The silence of the Seoul apartment was suffocating, broken only by the low, rhythmic thrum of Ken's phone on the floor. He stared at it for a long time, Watching Mark's name flash across the screen for the 10th time that night, his hand trembled as he finally reached out and swiped the green icon. He didn't say anything, he couldn't. He just held the cold glass to his ear, his breath hitching in his chest. Ken? Mark's voice came through, sounding raw and exhausted, but so familiar it made Ken's heart ache. Ken, are you there? Please, just tell me you're breathing. Ken closed his eyes, a single tear escaping and tracing a hot path down his cheek. He slumped against the wall of the balcony, the city lights below blurring into a smear of neon. How are you? Mark asked softly. Ken just listened. The sound of Mark's voice was like a life raft in a dark ocean. He felt a sudden, violent wave of relief wash over him, and he couldn't hold it back anymore. The silent sobs finally broke through, his shoulders shaking as he wept into the receiver. All right, Mark whispered, his own voice cracking. Maybe you're not ready to talk. That's okay. Just don't hang up, Kenji. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. If you can't say it in English, say it in Korean. Say everything. Scream it, cry it. I just want to be there with you. I won't understand the words, so I can't judge. Just let it out. Ken took a jagged, shaky breath. He looked back into the dark apartment where his brother lay passed out, the smell of failure and alcohol clinging to the walls. Then the words started to pour out of him in a desperate, rapid-fire stream of Korean. 내가 너무 한심해, Mark. Ken choked out. I'm so pathetic, Mark. 우리 형은 알코올 중독이고 나는 아빠를 지키지 못했어. 내가 항상 실패한 것만 같아. My brother's an alcoholic, and I couldn't protect my father. I feel like I always fail. He talked about the crushing guilt of being in America while his father grew weak. He talked about the bitter fights with Daishim and the way the apartment felt like a cage of memories. He let out all the anger, the grief, and the exhaustion that had been rotting inside him for 2 weeks. Finally, his voice dropped to a whisper, his forehead resting against the cool metal railing. 네가 여기 있었으면 좋겠어. 너무나 보고 싶어. If you were here, I miss you so much. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mark didn't know the specifics, but he could hear the soul-crushing weight in Ken's tone. He stayed on the line, listening to Ken's ragged breathing until it finally started to level out. You feel better now? Mark asked quietly. I'm still here. Ken wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, feeling a strange, hollow calm. Yeah, he whispered in English. I think so. Good, Mark said, trying to inject a tiny bit of the old golden boy confidence back into his voice. Now come back soon. I miss my rival. The court feels empty, and I'm tired of being the only one making highlights. I need you there to talk trash to me. Ken looked out at the Seoul skyline, the distance between them feeling both infinite and incredibly small. He didn't know when he could leave. There were still debts to settle and a brother who was falling apart. But for the first time since the funeral, he felt like he had a reason to try. Thank you, Mark, Ken said, his voice finally steady. Truly, thank you. He didn't promise a date. He didn't say he was coming home tomorrow. But as he hung up the phone, he picked up his basketball from the corner of the room and gripped it tight, the familiar texture grounding him back to reality. The morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, smelling of roasted coffee and the quiet hum of a typical Saturday. Mark sat at the table, his mind miles away in a Seoul apartment, until the sudden, sharp intake of breath from his father in the living room pulled him back. Mark, get in here. Do you know this guy? His father shouted, his voice thick with disbelief. Mark hurried into the room, coffee sloshing in his mug. On the massive TV screen, the post-game chaos of the NBA Finals was unfolding. Confetti rained down like a blizzard. Teammates were weeping, hoisting their wives and children into the air, surrounded by the traditional image of victory and family. But in the center of the court stood the team captain, a legendary veteran, a man known for his grit and private life. He stood alone, no wife, no girlfriend, no kids. Suddenly, the captain turned toward the front row of the stands. He pointed directly at a man in the crowd, a regular-looking fan in a team jersey. "Come down here," the captain mouthed, gesturing frantically. The security let the man through. The crowd went silent as the fan reached the hardwood, looking confused and overwhelmed. "Why are you doing this?" the fan whispered, his voice caught by the captain's jersey mic. The captain looked straight into the camera, his eyes shining with a mix of exhaustion and absolute defiance. "I can't take it anymore," he said, his voice echoing through the arena and into millions of homes. "I'm tired of hiding. I've got my MVP. I'm retiring as a legend today. And the world should know how much I love you." Before the announcer could even gasp, the captain grabbed the man by the jacket and pulled him into a deep, crushing kiss right on the painted logo of center court. The stadium erupted. Mark's parents sat frozen, their mouths open in shock. Mark felt a jolt of electricity go through his entire body. It was like a mirror held up to his own soul, Ken's POV. In the dim light of the Seoul apartment, the same broadcast flickered on a small screen. Ken sat on the floor, a half-eaten bowl of ramen in front of him. When the captain kissed that man, Ken's heart stopped. He looked at the screen, then at his own hands calloused from years of playing a tough sport. He felt a sudden, suffocating wave of envy and hope. He did it, Ken thought. He gave it all up just to be real. His phone vibrated violently on the floor. It was Mark. Ken picked up on the first ring, his voice trembling. "I saw it. I can't take this anymore, Ken." Mark's voice came through, sounding more determined than Ken had ever heard him. He was breathing hard, the sound of a bedroom door slamming shut in the background. "I'm tired of the golden boy act. I'm tired of the secret calls and the fake dating and the ocean between us." "Mark, what are you saying?" Ken whispered, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I'm flying to Korea tomorrow," Mark declared. There was no hesitation, no maybe. "I already looked up the flights. I'm coming to find you. Wait for me, Kenji. Don't you dare go anywhere." Ken sat in the silence of his childhood home, the ghost of his father and the shadow of his brother fading into the background. For the first time in weeks, the cold in his chest began to melt. "I'll be here," Ken whispered, a tear of relief finally falling. "I'll be waiting." The sliding doors of the Inchin arrivals gate hissed open, and the world seemed to slow down. Mark stepped through, his tall, athletic frame impossible to miss, even in a sea of travelers. He wasn't wearing his Westview jersey or a polished suit for a sponsor, just a simple hoodie and a look of pure, desperate hunger. Ken was standing near the railing, his breath hitching as their eyes locked. Before Ken could even say a word, Mark was there, dropping his bags and pulling Ken into a crushing embrace that smelled like home and high-altitude air. "I told you I was coming," Mark rasped against Ken's ear, his grip possessive and unyielding. They didn't stay in Seoul. Mark had handled everything with the efficiency of a man on a mission. A short flight later, they were touching down in Jeju, driving toward a secluded, ultra-private mini-resort, nestled between the volcanic cliffs and the crashing turquoise waves. The moment the heavy wooden door of the villa clicked shut, the golden boy mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Mark turned on Ken like a predator finally catching his prize. He pinned Ken against the door, his hands tangling in Ken's dark hair, and kissed him with a ferocity that made Ken's knees buckle. This wasn't the tentative, careful Mark from the hospital. This was a man who had flown halfway across the world to claim what was his. "Mine," Mark growled against Ken's lips, his voice a low, vibrating rumble. No more rivals, no more distance, just us. Mark picked Ken up effortlessly, Ken's legs wrapping around Mark's waist as they moved toward the expansive master suite. The room was bathed in the soft, golden light of the Jeju sunset, the sound of the ocean providing a rhythmic backdrop to the heat rising between them. As they fell onto the silken sheets, Mark was slow and deliberate. He wanted to savor every second of the moment they had been building toward since that first game at camp. He worshipped every inch of Ken's lean, muscular body, his touch firm and worshipful. When the time finally came for them to cross that ultimate line, for Mark to finally take the gift Ken had been saving only for him, the air in the room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of their connection. Mark looked Ken in the eye, his blue gaze burning with an honesty that was raw and protective. "I've got you, Kenji," Mark whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm never letting go." In the quiet sanctuary of the resort, the last of the barriers fell away. The lethal rival and the golden boy finally became one, a union that was as much about their souls as it was about their bodies. That first night was only the beginning. For one entire week, the rest of the world ceased to exist. They didn't check their phones. They didn't care about the news or the scouts. The villa became a blurred sanctuary of tangled limbs, whispered promises, and a physical intimacy that seemed to grow deeper with every passing hour. They spent their days swimming in the private pool and their nights exploring every inch of each other, making up for every second they had spent apart. By the time the week drew to a close, the marks on their skin had faded, but the bond between them was permanent. The Jeju sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, honey-colored glow across the rumpled sheets of the villa. After a week where time seemed to stop, the reality of the outside world was slowly starting to knock at the door. Mark lay on his back, his arm draped possessively over Ken's chest, pulling him close so their heartbeats synced. "You can't stay here, Ken," Mark whispered, his voice low and serious. "Not with your brother like that, and not with the scouts waiting for you back in the States. You're too good to let this game go." Ken traced the athletic tape lines on Mark's shoulder, his expression thoughtful. "It's complicated, Mark. My family, the funeral. I feel like I have roots pulling me down into the dirt here." Mark turned on his side, his blue eyes intense. "Then transplant those roots. Come back to the US with me. I've already talked to my coach off the record. We have a transfer spot. If you switch to Westview, we aren't rivals anymore. We're teammates. We'd be the most lethal backcourt in the country." Ken looked up at him, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "Teammates? You think you can handle me being on your side of the court? You'd have to share the ball, Miller." "I'll share anything with you," Mark promised, his hand sliding up to cup Ken's jaw. "But we have to be smart. We saw what happened with that NBA captain. The world, they aren't all like Sophia. If we want to make it to the pro leagues, we keep us behind closed doors. We play the part of the best friends, the dynamic duo, until we've got our rings and our legacy. Then we can tell them whenever we want." Ken was silent for a long moment, the weight of the decision hanging in the salty air. "And my citizenship? If I'm going to commit to a life there, to a career with you, we'll look into the naturalization process," Mark said firmly. "You can change your nationality, become a citizen. No more international flights, no more 14-hour gaps, just one home, one team." The idea of a fresh start, leaving the grief and the bitterness of his brother behind for a life where he could finally be with the person he loved, felt like a dream Ken was finally allowed to wake up into. "Teammates," Ken repeated, the word sounding right for the first time. "I like the sound of that, but if we're on the same team, I'm still taking the final shot." Mark laughed, a bright, genuine sound that echoed through the private suite. He leaned down, sealing the deal with a lingering, soft kiss. "Deal. As long as I'm the one setting the screen for you." They spent the rest of the night mapping out the logistics, the visas, the housing, and the secret code they'd use on the court to communicate things only they understood. The Golden Boy and his lethal rival were officially retiring their war. A new chapter was beginning, and this time they were playing for the same side. The flight back to the United States felt like a transition between two different lives. As the plane touched down on American soil, Ken felt the weight of his old grief staying behind in the clouds, replaced by the solid, warm presence of Mark sitting in the seat next to him. They walked through the airport as teammates, shoulders squared, athletic bags slung over their shoulders, the perfect image of two elite prospects ready to dominate the league. To the fans and the paparazzi waiting at the terminal, they were the ultimate story. The legendary rivals who had finally put aside their differences to chase a championship together. "You ready for this?" Mark whispered as they pulled up to the Westview athletic complex. The massive glass building reflected the afternoon sun, looking like a fortress of high expectations. Ken adjusted his cap, his dark eyes sharp and focused. "I was born ready, Miller. Just don't trip over my feet when I'm leading the fast break." Mark laughed, that familiar golden boy spark returning to his gaze. "In your dreams, Kenji." As they stepped through the heavy double doors of the Westview gym, the sound of squeaking sneakers and echoing whistles filled the air. The entire team stopped mid-drill. Coach stood at center court, his arms crossed, a knowing smirk on his face as he watched his two star players walk in side by side. "Welcome home, boys," the coach barked. "Get changed. We've got a season to win." That night, after a grueling 3-hour practice where their chemistry on the court was so electric, it left the scouts speechless. They retreated to Mark's private apartment. The door clicked shut, and the teammate masks finally dropped. Mark pinned Ken against the wall of the entryway, his kiss tasting of sweat and triumph. "We did it," Mark breathed against his lips. "You're here. You're mine." "For now," Ken whispered, his hands sliding into Mark's hair. "But the world is watching, Mark. We're playing a dangerous game. One wrong look, one photo in the wrong place. Let them watch," Mark replied, his voice dropping to a protective, possessive low. "As long as we win, they'll believe whatever story we tell them." They stood there in the quiet of the apartment, two hearts beating as one, hidden in plain sight. They had the rings, the fame, and each other. But as Ken's phone buzzed on the counter with an unknown international number from Korea, a shadow of the past flickered in the dark. The game was just beginning. The rivalry has ended, but the secret is just starting to burn.